We are in Brachot, and we started a brand new chapter. We're on chapter 5, and we are on page 30. We're on page, what page would it be here? 30. I believe it's page 30. So let me make sure on the Gemara. I don't have the Gemara with. It is page 30b. Good. 30b. So we have the first thing. It says, first of all, I'll give you the background. We're talking about prayer and what sense, the seriousness of prayer, how we have to enter into prayer and how we should, what our mindset should be. Okay, that's really what we're talking about. So it says, "Ein omdim litpalel." I'm sorry. Do you have it? You're not. It's talking about the Mishnah where it says one should not stand in prayer except through having his mind set on it. You have that?
The last I had, we were talking about facing Israel.
No, let me see. Let me see, please. And I'll see if I can find it really quickly. So it is right here. Right here at the bottom. That's right there at the bottom. Right here. Okay? So it says, Ein adar omden. Again, a man should not stand. Litpalel, he should not get up to daven. We're talking about Shmona Esrei always. In this case, we're talking Shmona Esrei, the Hamida. Ela mitoch koved rosh. He has to have seriousness in his mind. He cannot be thinking about 1,000 different things. And it says, just to finish this part of the Mishnah, Chasidim Harishonim. The first Chasidim, we're talking way back, not what we call a Chassid today, but the original Chasidim, who were people who went beyond the letter of the law, who devoted themselves to Hashem and the Torah. So what happened? When they would daven, Shohin Sha'a Achat, they would wait for 1 hour, then, in other words, ready themselves for 1 hour, Umid Palalim, and then they would pray, Kedei Shechavanu Libam Lavinu Shishmaim, and only then would they pray the Shmona Esrei in order that they could concentrate their hearts to Hashem, to their Father that's in heaven. So they would literally spend 1 hour in preparation before saying Shmona Esrei.
Now, is this 1 hour in preparation just meditating, or is this what has come down to us as Pizukei D'Zimra and the Shema and its brachas? Okay,
so I would suggest that today for us, that probably was what is turned into, but it seems from the Gemara that they literally would meditate for 1 hour, get into what they were going to do, understand the seriousness of what was happening and who they were approaching, if you will. Okay, and so that's why it said that they would take 1 hour to ready themselves. 1 hour they would spend in tefillah. And by the way, it would take 1 hour for Shmona Esrei. So therefore, any rabbi who davens less than an hour is nowhere near them. Okay, when our rabbi will daven 10 minutes under Shmona Esrei, we think that guy is beyond reality. Why are you torturing us for a 10-minute Shmona Esrei? Okay, really, that's how we view it. I don't know if anybody really goes 10 minutes. I think it seems like 10 minutes, but they probably only do 7 or 8 minutes. But even that today is considered a lifetime. You're torturing me. But they used to go 1 hour. And more than that, the Gemara continued that they would spend an hour coming down from that. So there's 3 hours they would spend on davening. Shmona Esrei. Shmona Esrei, you have to understand that. Shmona Esrei. So the Eitz Yosef looks at this, and just to give you, is it the Eitz Yosef? Yeah. So I'm going to go to the 1 hour first. It says, it's written that even though that in many places in the Talmud, when it says one sha'a, 1 hour, it doesn't really mean an hour. It means a few minutes before. It's just a sha'a, a moment of time. Okay? That's really what, in normal cases, sha'a means. If I tell you, wait, sha'a, it's like rock brega. Wait a second, get yourself together, compose yourself, and continue on. But in this case, it says we have to understand it as really one 60-minute hour. Why? Because it said in the Talmud, it questions. Wait a second, it says in the Talmud, if they waited 1 hour before saying Shemona Esrei, and then they spent an hour in Shemona Esrei, and then they spent an hour coming it down, if you will, from the spiritual reality of Shemona Esrei. There's 3 hours. And then you have Shachris Mincha. That's 9 hours. When did they study and when did they learn? They had to do both those things. And the Gemara answers that while they were, what does it say? Kevan shekain hayu shoen b'chol tefillah. Since they would wait that long in every tefillah, v'toratam u'malachtam ematenasit. So when would they do their work? And mitoch chasidim heim toratam. Since they were chasidim, since they had such kavanah, since they had such a desire to serve Hashem, so their Torah was mitkayemet. In other words, their Torah lasted. So whatever they learned, it was there. And also, malachtam mitbarechet, where their work was blessed. So think about this. I'm spending 9 hours of tefillah. It's a long time because my connection to Hashem. Also, a tremendous amount of concentration to go an hour. And I'm just thinking about who I'm serving. And then I pray and so on and so forth. Well, Hashem's reward to those people were whatever they learned stuck. That was it. Unlike us, we have to go over and over and over and over and over. Whatever they learned stuck, and more than that, whenever they did their work, it was blessed. So now there was, I won't mention the name of the place at this time, but there was a place I worked where there was somebody who was rich, very rich, and so the Gabbai of the place once said to me, because he was talking, it was a friend of his, so he said to me, yeah, every morning when Poloni gets up, God says to Poloni, so what can I do for you today? That's how, he had the golden touch. Whatever he touched turned to, really. That's what his reputation was. Well, I'm not saying, I'm just saying because of this. He didn't dive in for hours. But that would be what's going on here. These Hasidim, Rishonim had the golden touch. Whatever they touched, it became blessed, and they didn't have to work that hard. So they did their work. They did their hashtadlut. But they didn't have to be involved like we do 20 hours or 40 hours a week. They were put in 18, 20 minutes, whatever it's going to be, and Hashem would give them, it would make a blessing, and that would be it. Okay, so that's how the Gemara answered. But from there you learn that this hour was really an hour and not just a few minutes. Like I said, for us, if we can get of just a few minutes, which would be through Pesukei de Zimra, the Psalms of praise that we say. Why do we say the Psalms of praise? To remind us who we're serving. Really, that's all it is. If I can remember that's why when somebody is reading the tefillah, but they're not understanding it, or they're not even trying to concentrate, it's just a matter of a speed contest, or speed reading contest, they're not getting the benefit of what it should be, which is why in Shulchan Aruch, it says, the Mishnah Berurah should say, it says if one says, rather one should say less and have more concentration than to say a whole bunch of things with no concentration. It's all for me to get into the mindset of knowing who I'm serving and who I'm praying to. And that's why it says you shouldn't stand except for Koved Rosh. And that's why the Eitz Yosef also says, it doesn't mean literally with a heavy head, as it were, but it's a way of a parable, as it says that because the head is on top of all the limbs, and therefore it weighs down upon all of them. So we have to humble ourselves before Hashem, and we need to pray with awe and trepidation and humility, right? In order to make our prayers a desirous prayer, and one that can be received by Hashem. If I'm going to just pray again, just to kick off the prayer, I'm not really thinking about it, or I'm just doing a rote, that doesn't have the tachanunim, the petition that we talked about in the previous on the previous days. Okay, so then it says, in order that you should have intent to Hashem, to your Father in heaven, so again the Eitz Yosef says Kadesh. The explanation is Kadesh Yichavanu She'elibam Shalem Bavodah Hashem Yisbarach. That because you want your heart, the service of your heart should be complete in the service of Hashem. If I'm not, again, if I'm just running through it, I'm not going to be able to develop that. What I'll be doing is I'll be reading the prayers, and I possibly could be thinking about my family or my the work that I have to fulfill, or the sports team, whatever's going to be. Or when you see people going like this while they're davening, they're on their what's it called, the iPhone or the e-phone, all these phones. And they're reading or it's even better, they have to multitask. So they read their emails or the texts or the sports teams. Again, they can read anything while they're davening, because they're saying the words. In their minds, I said the words. I said every single word. I know I said it because I memorized it when I was a child. Do I know what I said? I don't even care what I said. I was more interested in the email. And that's what the rabbis were really trying to break us of that habit. And apparently, by the way, for the very fact that the Talmud saying this over 1,500 years ago, it's nothing new. I want you to remember that. It's nothing new. The same problems that we have today, we've just updated it with our cell phones and iPhones, and what else is it called? The tablets and the tabloids, and it's all different names every 2 seconds. But the point is that there's no big difference between them and now, except the toy. Yeah. That's all it is. The toy is the only difference. But so that's how it is. That we're supposed to stand Bekavod Rosh. We're supposed to have in mind this weight of understanding who we're speaking with and why we're doing this to begin with, and of course what we're actually saying, which is why when it says the minimum of your kavana should be that you just understand what the words are. Which is why our scroll came out with the interlinear, and you had the Mitzuda with the linear, and so on and so forth. Our scroll, or any book, with the translation. The hope was that the person would look while they're praying, and knowing what they're saying, they would at least look at the English, or the vernacular, and try to understand it. Of course, the best thing, as Birnbaum said, in the Birnbaum Sidor, it says, when we're talking about the Long Tachanun, it says it would be to everybody. It would be worthwhile for a person to study for 10 years to understand Hebrew, just to get this prayer, because of the beauty of the prayer. So even no matter who it was, they were all recognizing that understanding the prayer is very, very, very important, and it's not just enough to say it. So again, the rabbis were trying to get that across. Also, you have the Iyun Yaakov, who says there's really a lot here. So I don't want to run through it. I don't want to just fly over it today. But it says that even though that other mitzvot are fitting to do with simcha and with a tremendous joy in the heart, in order to show how dear the mitzvot are, even though that's the normal way to do a mitzvah, right? Here we're saying to do it with kavod rosh, with a seriousness of the head. Here, and yet normally we say Ibdur Hashem b'simcha, like I just gave a whole speech on that on Sunday. You have to serve God with joy. So here, why is it different? And it says, he continues, it's also written, I will rejoice over your statements, over what you do. Like I said, it also says, serve God with joy. However, he says, Tefillah Shmona Esrei, when it comes to the Amidah, Shehi Avot Ba'amidah, that you're standing, Ki ilu omed lifnei melech malchei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu. It is as if you were standing before the King of Kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Master, the Blessed One, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed One, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. There you go. Roy la'amod b'achna. It's fitting that he stands there with, again, this humility, this hachna is I'm submitting myself. Would that be called humility? Oh, yeah, okay. Because hachna, again, is a humbling. I'm humbling myself. Lifnei bor'o, before his creator. And at that point, v'yei ematu alav. At that point, once I realize who I'm standing before and I'm praying and I'm petitioning, there, how can I not have fear for that? How can I not have ema? It's an impossibility. Again, if I was in front of, we don't really have that today, but if you would have a king and you were standing in front of the king, who could kill you for what you say? So you would have all that fear and trepidation. Unlike today in America, we don't have that. Our president, whoever it is, cannot kill us for what we say. As a matter of fact, we can say whatever we want about the president and get away with it. Unlike apparently in France, where they cannot. But, they said it was not the president, they said against the Muslims. And that Charlie Hebdo, that magazine, you ever heard of it? Okay. And then ultimately the death that took place, the killing, the murder, that took place in the kosher store. But that's what we're saying. We have to have that ema. And my taima, so from that reason, it says, Sarshei anav lemata, that a person's eyes should be looking toward the ground. That you have to be trembling and so on and so forth. All these things that we should be doing in order for us to understand who we're praying for, who we're praying to. That's why it says one should not get up to pray Shemona Esrei except with this hachna, this humility, this humbleness that we have, this fear, trepidation. And then, but watch, you'll see, it will change that we have to also have joy. The question is, how are we going to be able to pull that off? Well, actually, I'll tell you because I don't know who's listening, what's going on. But what's going to happen is, once I realize who I'm talking to, at that point, I have a joy in knowing that I'm talking to the Creator. So I get myself at that humility, but then I have a tremendous joy. Like I was saying on Sunday, that when we serve at the pleasure of the Sovereign, what greater pleasure would that be? But to know that I'm serving Hashem. So that is when I go into joy. If I don't do that, by the way, if I don't realize who I'm serving, I will not have the joy either. This is an important point. If I just do this by rote and I never get to that point of hachna, of ema, of rada, again, of humility, of fear, and of trepidation, I will never have joy. It's an impossibility because I don't even recognize who I'm serving to begin with. So that's why when these people who go off the derech, quote unquote off the derech, which I don't know if, I know some people like that, don't like that term, but it doesn't matter. When they go non-religious from being religious, there's 1,000 reasons, but one of the main reasons that they'll give you is I didn't feel anything. Well, of course not, because you never understood what you were doing. You did it by rote. Because one thing I can tell you for a fact, we don't teach kids why we should daven. We teach kids how. The mechanics, when you bow, when you stand, when you do this, when you do that. We do not teach them. We don't force them to know the words. We don't teach it like that. In other words, if I would teach math like I teach prayer, my kids would not know how to add or subtract. Never mind multiply. They wouldn't know how to add or subtract. I want to understand that. And I guarantee you it's the same thing in every religion. We don't teach the what prayer means, what it's all about. And therefore, they don't develop this hachana. They don't develop this humility when they're approaching God. It's just a matter of let's run through it. And the one who goes fastest wins. But think about it, we're going through 100 pages in a half hour. It's a pretty good clip. Yeah, I'm saying every word. But and we're repeating some things too. We're repeating a lot. So that being the case, what's going on there? And how can people not be excited?
That's really 50 pages.
No, 100 pages.
Arts go.
No. I understand. 100 pages. We're saying basically 100 pages.
No, because the Hebrew page is page 1, the English page is page 1. It's the same number. So when you, wait a minute.
Yeah, so now you're agreeing with me.
That's right.
Now you're agreeing with me.
That's right.
Okay.
Otherwise, because the old Siddurim,
Right.
like the
So that'd be 1, 2.
They would 1,
Right.
2, 3,
Right.
4.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, we're saying 80 to 100 pages.
You're right.
Amazing speech. So what happens is, though, those people who are doing that, we're doing it while we're tired. It's a whole bunch of reasons we can't get into it. But it's, if I don't have the skill, if I've never been taught the skill, really that's what's going on. If I've never been taught the skill, then it's very hard for me to get into it. And prayer is one of those things which we're not taught. We're taught how to add, we're taught how to subtract, we're even taught how to understand a Rashi. But we're not taught how to understand prayer. We're not taught anything like that. You get it, you have, in first, second, and third grade, they have, while they're teaching, they give you a 5-minute vort, as to what the prayer means. But after that, it's nothing.
The first, second, third grade, you're not really even old enough to understand it, though.
Correct.
But
Correct.
Fourth, fifth, sixth, don't they get into any more at all?
No, never to be heard of again, because you're already praying. So it's I'm pretty sure it ends by fourth. By third you should be finished. You should be through the Shemona Esrei. So that's when it usually ends. If you have somebody who wants to make a teacher who wants to make something out of it, fine, but it's not part of the curriculum, certainly. And there's a lot of other things that have to be accomplished. So really they are limited. But it's because it's not seen as important. Yet it is the thing that we all do 3 times a day. That's what I'm saying. If that was taught properly, you would have a whole different shul experience. And again, for you, Bill, I would say the same thing for the church. If the church would do it, any religion, if this is what I'm doing 3 times a day. Oh no, you do it 5 times a day. You have Vespers and everything else. Yeah. So they do a lot. The Muslims, all these things. If they would tell them if the people would, maybe the Muslims do, by the way, I don't know, but I doubt they do. I doubt it. I don't think prayer means that much to people. But it's if they would really teach what's going on, and not only the mechanics, but not only the earliest time, the latest time, but what's really being said, and how do we have to get into it, and teach me what everything is about. And make me, again, just like I would know by 12th grade a certain amount of information, I should have that information about prayer. But if they would do that, I think you would see a different, then you would have this COVID rush. But until that, I don't know. I don't see it. That's my rant against the whole system. Okay, so, Mina Hanimir, so now the Gemara says, from where do I know that one must daven Shemona Esrei with this seriousness? So it says Amar Rav Elazar, the Amakra, because Rav Elazar says that the verse says V'hi marat nefesh v'tit palal. So we're talking about Chana, and it says that Chana was in very embittered spirit. What happened was she didn't have any children yet, and so she is praying very hard. She was extremely bitter at heart. So it seems that would prove that we have to all daven in that sort of way. Okay? So that bitter spirit, she prayed to Hashem. So he says, how do I know I should go from that source? Chana Shani. Maybe the case of Chana was different. Why was Chana different? Marira Liba Tuva. Because she was exceptionally bitter at heart. Let's look at what Chana had to deal with. Chana had her Penina, her co-wife, who had many kids, 10 kids altogether, and she would make fun of Chana saying, "Oh, Chana, we're going away. Maybe you should buy your kids some clothes." Oh, that's right. You don't have any kids. Maybe she. Oh, look at this. Nice stuff for nice candy for your kids. Oh, that's right. You don't have any kids. So she was exceptionally bitter. You could argue she was exceptionally bitter of at heart. So, and she was praying, and even though she was answered, you can't prove that we have to be that humble when we're praying. You can't learn from her because that was a special case. You could argue. So the Gemara says, wait, I'll prove it for another case. Ela Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. We can learn it. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina, said we can learn it from here. It says in the verse, Va'ani barov chasecha avo v'techa, that as for me, through your abundant mercy, I will enter your house. I will bow. I will bow toward your holy sanctuary. In awe of you. So therefore, that's from David HaMelech, I believe. Yeah, this is from David. And so you can say, it says, B'yiratecha, with fear, trepidation, going to enter your house. So it seems that, okay, we have a verse. So again, the Gemara says, V'mai, how do you know we should learn from here? Dima David Shani. Maybe King David HaMelech was different. Why? Dahave mitza'ar nafshe baracham etuva. For he would torment himself exceedingly and beseeching mercy. So maybe he was different. Let's understand who he was. He was the king. He was the king. He had all these people bothering him every 2 seconds. So maybe he had himself on a different level. So you could argue that he was different. Fine. So you can't learn from there. Ela Amar Rabbi Yossi ben Levi mehacha. So then Rabbi Yeshua Ben Levi said, you'll learn from here. It says, Yishtachavu la Hashem b'hadrat kodesh, which means prostrate yourself before Hashem in holy splendor. The Gemara says, it's a familiar thing from the Gemara. It says, Al tikre b'hadrat, don't read the word as hadrat, meaning in splendor. Ella, but in this case, understand the word to mean becherdat, in awe. So, which would put it back in the verse. Prostrate yourself before Hashem in awe. So our scroll says, as written, the verse would appear to imply that only people possessing splendor, physical beauty, should prostrate themselves before God, which is clearly a foolish thing to say. The Gemara therefore explains the verse as if it was read becherdat, meaning that a person should engender with himself in awe of God before praying. So that's what was being said by there. Fine. And then, so the Gemara says, good try, but mimai. How do I know that you should learn from this? Dilma li'olam e'malachav hadrat mamash. Perhaps, in fact, I will tell you that the word hadrat is to be taken literally. And the phrase would then mean that one should adorn themselves in preparation for prayer. In other words, when I'm going to daven, I have a choice. I can either go in my jeans and my t-shirt, or I can dress up properly. And I can put on a hat. I can put on a tie. I slipped. What can I tell you? And it's I can put on a jacket and a hat and a tie, whatever you want, what's going on in the world. But think about that. Who shows respect to prayer? We're coming off out of work many times. We're coming out of work clothes, however that is. It could be that you're working. One guy, I told him this many times. One guy came to the minyan with his scrubs on. Came with his scrubs. I mean, Baruch Hashem, he came because otherwise we wouldn't have a minyan. So I don't belittle it. But he came with the scrubs, and the question is, would you go to a meeting like that? Of course you wouldn't go to a meeting like that. If you had a meeting, a big meeting, a meeting that meant something, you're going to put on your jacket, you're going to put on your tie, you're going to comb your hair, you're going to take a shower if necessary. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to have it done. So, and there was a story that they tell, I don't know where it was, probably in New York, that there was a guy who would come, he would always come in a suit jacket and polished shoes to the show. And he would always be there early, and so on and so forth. Fine. So they said, and they still wanted to honor this guy. So somebody said, "What's so big about him? I also dress up." He said, "They don't understand." They told him, "This guy, he's a big businessman, and he has to work wherever he's working. And before he comes to Minyan, he always spends a half hour preparing himself, combing the hair, making sure he looks presentable, and everything else." And when we asked him why he does, he said, "What are you talking about? Here, all the day I work with all these people, and I have to look good. So now, when I come before the Rabbanu Shalom, the Master of the universe, I shouldn't give him the same derech eretz, the same thing." So as a result, he makes sure his shoes will always shine, impeccably shine. What the armed forces would say, you have to shine it so you can see your face in the shine, something like that.
Yeah.
And but that's how he came to Shul, and that's why they wanted to honor. He never wanted the honor, by the way. He never took the honor, from what I understood. But it's that was the sort of mentality that he had, and that's what the Gemara is saying here. Maybe what the Torah is really telling us is, while we're not saying you have to be one of the beautiful people, if you're not a beautiful person, you can't daven, but rather we have to dress accordingly. Maybe he's trying to teach us that. And therefore, you couldn't argue that this would be telling us we should become, that you have to have koved rosh, that you have to have trepidation for God. He had the Rav Yehuda, because such was the practice of Rav Yehuda, that having mitzayin nafshe bahader machle, because you had the case where Rav Yehuda would indeed distinguish himself by donning his finest attire and then pray. So the Gemara says, Ella. So it wouldn't be there. So then it says, where are we? Ella Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi Mehacha. I said that. I'm sorry. Okay. Ella Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Mehacha. So Rav Nachman, son of Yitzchak, said, you can learn from here. Ibdu et Hashem v'simcha b'yira. You should serve Hashem with fear, v'gilu b'ra'ada, and rejoice with trepidation. So here's what we're getting down to. We're getting down to the end of this whole thing. And it says, wait a second. My gilu v'ra'ada. What's meant by rejoice with trepidation? So Amar Rav Ada bar Matna. Amar Rava. So Rav Ada, the son of Masnus, and the name of Rava. Bimkom Gila Shamtehe Re'ada. In a place where there is rejoicing, there should also be trepidation. So let's see what that means. So where was it? That's what I was talking about before. So I have to find it. I'm sorry. It's crazy when I want something, I can't find it here. Okay. They talk about dead ear.
Should we rattle some papers?
Yeah, he's rattle some papers, right? Okay. Well, I'll find it as I go on. Okay, let's just continue. So, but I'll show up. Okay. So he says, Rabbi Yirmiyah. So here's an interesting story. Rabbi Yirmiyah hava yadvei kamei de Rav Zera. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting in front of Rav Zera. Chazye to have kai madich tuva. He saw that he was a little too happy, as it were, joking around too much. So Amalei Gilu Barada Ketiv. It says in the verse that you should rejoice with trepidation. And here I see you're fooling around a little too much. So Amalei Ana Tefillim Menachna. I'm wearing tefillin. I'm wearing my phylacteries. You got that? You hear his answer? You're fooling around too much? Don't worry about it. I'm wearing my tefillin. Doesn't make sense. If anything, with my tefillin on, my crown, I should have more trepidation. Again, before the king. So here, the Kotev writes, he says, Ef Sharem is possible that what he's doing is hinting, when he says, I have my tefillin on, that he says, V'hu ki kol holech b'derech tamim, that anybody who walks in a complete manner, Sarach sameach bechelko. He has to be happy in his good portion. B'masha rodev achar shlemot, and that he's going after, pursuing this complete relationship with God. Okay? That's what he's saying. I'm happy because I'm wearing my tefillin, so therefore I'm really complete with Hashem. I'm serving God completely. V'lo yikra shalem b'tachlit ad shegiya lezeh, and you don't reach this. You don't call a person complete in his in purpose until he reaches that he can say sheyifol kol peula tu b'sasum simcha. That until he's serving Hashem with joy and happiness. As it says, Hamashomer and Lechalti at the Techel Yolam Kisasonli Bihema, fine. Yomar, and it says Yomar Ematai Yihu Edotecha Limanachala. When do I have your testimonies as my inheritance for forever? Kashir Sasonli be when my heart is happy. Hema Roshimo Shalibi Sas. That's one, because my heart is rejoicing, and that in that I can be fulfilling your testimonies. So, and what's tefillin? Eidot, right? They're the aid. They're giving testimony to what Hashem did for us. That He took us out of Egypt, that He created the world, ex nihilo, and so on and so forth. So they're giving testimony. So when I put on my tefillin, I'm rejoicing because I can complete, I can fulfill I serve God totally. Well, the kavana zot, and with this kavana, with this intent, heishiv, tefillin kamanachim. That's why he says tefillin were on my head, as if to say, af al pisha simcha hu poel maguna b'mili da alma. Even though that when I have joy, when a person just has joy, but in the normal world, that's not a good thing. In other words, if I don't have joy, if I have empty joy, if you will, I won the mega bucks, I have good joy. Whatever the case is, if I'm going to just have the frivolity of the secular world with the temporal world, well, that's not a good type of simcha to have, he's saying. But for me, mitzvah b'simcha rabba, but for a person who fulfills the mitzvah with great simcha, that is ma'ala gedola. That is the greatest level one can have for himself. Shehi simcha nafshiyat, because that is the joy of the soul. So that's why he said, don't worry, the reason I'm rejoicing is because I know I'm serving Hashem totally, and that's why I have my tefillin on. And I have my tefillin on. So another case for that would be Tana Rabbana I'm sorry, I missed one. Abaya Haviyat Ve Kamei Rava. So Abaya was sitting in front of Rava. Again, same sort of story. Badach Tuva. So he sees Abaya saw Rava also very happy. He says to him, does not the master believe all the sadness should be there? How does he translate that? In all sorrow there is profit. Fine, okay. He does it nice better. So Amalei Anam Tefillin Menachna. I'm wearing tefillin again. The same sort of concept. Where I'm serving Hashem in joy, I'm serving Hashem completely, and that's why it's in joy, so I'm allowed to do that, and that's where we'll stop.